Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Elbows Tight Podcast. It's your host, Travis. John is on vacation right now at the time of this recording. So this episode is all by myself. Today's guest it's kind of weird. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I feel a little awkward doing an episode by myself without John. But maybe someday in the future, he might have to do one by himself. So we got to get used to this. But today's episode is with Thomas Rozdzynski. And today we cover topics of how ideas and concepts change from white to black. And today's conversation is great with Thomas. If you guys don't know who Thomas Rozdzynski is, he's a third-degree black belt. He is the owner of Roll Academy in the Chicago area, does Roll Radio, Roll Academy Online, also Ask a Black Belt podcast. And I wanted to talk to him about it because I wanted to get his perspective of someone that's been doing jiu-jitsu for 20 plus years on how these things have changed for him and how they might look for someone right now in their journey, and kind of hopefully give them a path to how it can change for them too. You know what I mean? So some of the topics we cover today are the idea of space, the idea of education, tracking your jiu-jitsu journey, and just like a whole bunch of different other things that I think you guys are going to have a great time listening to. So thank you, Thomas, for coming on the show like usual. And then other than that, I don't really have anything. This is a pretty short intro. I'll keep it simple. That way you guys get straight into the interview. So thank you guys so much for listening and watching at home. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Drop a DM on which concept might have been the biggest game changer for you. And let me know what you guys think. Thanks for listening. Peace. Thomas Rozdzynski, how's it going, man? Welcome back to the Elbows Tight Podcast. I know we've been keeping in touch quite a bit after our episode, but I've been wanting to have you back on, and we finally made it happen. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here. It's always great to catch up with you and have the great conversation.
No, man, I greatly appreciate it. Today's topic we kind of talked about before recording and also through the gram. Today, what I really want to cover is concepts and ideas that have changed since from white belt to black belt. And for those at home, what I'm talking about is recently our black belt has been teaching more conceptual ideas in our classes. And one thing that's really changed for me is the idea of what it means to have space, take space, give space, and all that stuff. And that's really changed my idea on other things in jiu-jitsu that I thought I kind of understood, but didn't really understand. And the longer I've been a blue belt, the more I've realized, like, oh man, I don't know anything about jiu-jitsu. So Thomas, if you guys don't know who he is a third-degree black belt up in Chicago area. He owns Roll Academy, does Roll Radio, a fantastic podcast, Roll Academy Online, and all that stuff. And if you guys want to know more of the background on how he got into jiu-jitsu and everything like that, you can go listen to, oh man, I should have looked up what episode it was, but his previous episode with us, and it was a great conversation. We kind of talked a lot about in our previous episode about competition, promotions, and stuff like that, and it was a fantastic conversation, and so I'm looking forward to having another one today, man.
Yeah, no, it's again, it's great to be here. Isn't it interesting how more you train jiu-jitsu, more you realize how much more there is to it. It's like there is this, what is this saying? There's this phrase, more you learn, less you know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like more you dip deeper, more you go deeper into it. It's like another door. Oh yeah. My God, now there's a whole stadium in front of you.
Yeah,
like it just never ends.
Yeah, it's so crazy, and that's like kind of like what I mentioned is, even as a seasoned blue belt, I said on the last episode, I got my third strap on my blue belt, so now I'm feeling, like I'm less likely to quit. So it's like so now these different ideas are really starting to change for me. And like I mentioned before, the first one that really kind of opened my eyes was the idea of space. When I first started jiu-jitsu, I thought, I heard the saying, whoever controls the space controls the pace, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, that meant I better hug them close. Don't let them do anything. I can't let them get away from me, right? I have to be the aggressor. I have to be the one taking up this space as much as possible, right? But now I've come to realize that that's not true at all. Sometimes you have to give space in order to take space. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
how has that idea changed for you?
Yeah, I mean, over time, it's almost like evolution of its own, because I often feel that once we have a deeper understanding on a concept or a subset of techniques or a little system, whatever it is, somebody does something and it's like, oh crap, like everything I thought I knew, now it's being questioned. Now it's is a subject to change, and it's like, damn it, I got to start over here, So and I think that we all go through this cycle, if you will, of these. I'm getting there. I finally have this under control, and it's like somebody does something unpredictable, and it's like, okay, back to the drawing board. What does that mean? Did I waste my time? And I don't think necessarily it's wasting our time, because if it was wasting our time, we would not be making any progression. So just the fact that we are progressively getting better, is a testimonial of the fact that we are growing. Now, because jiu-jitsu is so unpredictable, because the evolution of jiu-jitsu continues growing, and then we are growing at the same time with different pace between different people, different academies, different places where we train. It's like never-ending race without the finish line, almost, right? It's like we are almost going, and we have to continue adapting to these situations. So it's interesting, and a space, control of the space often is one of the hardest items for a student to understand, because it's just like what you mentioned. I think that's very common, and I think our human brains, works in a way where we say, control the space, then automatically we say, well, remove all the space, don't let it move.
Remove it.
Right? But removing the space doesn't always mean a good thing. Removing the space, that also means that you are committing yourself to the other person. So, now who's really in charge? And I often say jiu-jitsu is like a trade. I have to give something up to gain something else. And it's never one-sided trade. It never happens that way. So what I mean by that, if I give up space, now there's attachment. So I sacrifice space, but I have attachment. Now, if I attach myself, and if I give up the attachment, now there is space. So it's one or the other. Now, the trick really is to figure out which one is more useful, which one I can capitalize on at this particular point with the surroundings that I'm finding myself in. That's the hard part, So this is where the maturity of jiu-jitsu comes in. Time spent on the mat and really trying to understand it and studying it, and then again, your buddy comes along and he throws a wrench into the whole thing, and you scratching your head, and we kind of, that's the beauty behind it, isn't it? I mean, it would be kind of boring if it was any other way.
Agreed. And I even think not only is in a practical standpoint of application of technique during sparring or something like that this happens too, but when a new instructor or you go to a seminar or something like that, and then you start hearing from other people, you're like, oh my God. It's like you mentioned it, it's kind of, I thought I was understanding. This is part of, prime example, like this is part of my game. You go to a seminar thinking like, they'll just kind of like hone my sword a little bit, and then you get there and you're like, my sword is completely dull. Like I thought, like I don't even have a sword. Like this is a wooden stick in the backyard. You know what I mean? Like you just, your mind just opens up to all these new things. I went to a Carlson Gracie Jr. seminar and here in Washington, and he was teaching just like such very basic and simple things during his seminar, and I was sitting there like, I do this stuff, and I've been doing it wrong, Yeah. And it was cool because it opened another gateway of possibilities to what my technique can accomplish,
Yeah, and I think that's a very common feeling, even for more advanced individuals, even for black belts. I mean, these conversations take place not only on the, with your peers, but legit with other black belts. Like, it happens over and over and over, even for me personally, I'm sitting down with the guys who've been on the mat for 20, 30 years, and something comes along, there's a question, and it's like, how you do it? What about this? What do you think about this? And then it's like, damn it, for 20 years, literally, I've been doing it this way, and nobody ever told me about this. Like, how is this even physically possible that I've never stumbled upon? Forget about someone intentionally telling me, but like, how come I didn't trip over this? Like, why I never noticed this part? But again, I think if you look at jiu-jitsu from kind of a holistic, very high level perspective, it is so broad, it is so huge that you're talking about ocean of the ocean amount of information, and we are just like one little drop, So knowing everything is impossible, and I truly believe that knowing all of the jiu-jitsu is impossible for any of us. And there are some brilliant minds in jiu-jitsu, who know a lot, but I think, even them, even those brilliant guys, I don't know if they know everything. I don't know if there is such thing as knowing everything,
Right.
But I think we can drive towards knowing a lot and really understanding it. And in the beginning, you mentioned a conceptual teaching and conceptual understanding of jiu-jitsu. And I think that's the new approach of jiu-jitsu, which I find very appealing. A couple years ago, somebody said, conceptual jiu-jitsu is like an alphabet, right? One can learn the words of the new language, or you can learn the letters and create your own words. So in a sense, understanding concepts is you understand the mechanics, and you understand, how it works from a physics perspective and a human body. But you don't have to memorize individual steps. The individual steps are up to you as a student or as a practitioner to manipulate to your own need. And there has to be something behind this, from a truth perspective. Because think about it. I mean, 20-year-old individual who's, let's hypothetically just say he's 170 pounds is going to move mechanically completely different than somebody who's 50 and is 250, right? I mean, those two bodies cannot move the same way. There's just different weight associated with it, with different agility, different way how their joints and their bodies move, and so there has to be some unique way of combining all of this and allowing students to understand across the larger or broader spectrum. So I've been a big fan of conceptual jiu-jitsu, and allowing the students to really understand how it works, and allowing them also to create their own interpretation of it.
Yeah, kind of to your point too, where you talk about, we're just a droplet of water in the ocean. And to me, it's like the ocean is continually getting bigger too. You know what I mean? Like our drop, it means much less as the whole knowledge of jiu-jitsu continues to grow too. And I think when it comes to things like even techniques, understanding how to apply a technique, like you mentioned also, it's not always going to be one of our previous guests. He mentioned, as a coach, his job is to teach a technique to where you can recognize that, I may not have steps 1 through 3, but right now I'm in steps 3 through 8 or 4 through 8. So I still can execute the technique as long as I can understand the concept of what the technique is. Is it just time on mat that we start understanding these things, or is there a better way that we can show students, particularly newer practitioners, on how to visualize these roadways with different forks to where they can still get to the same destination?
Yeah, I think that's the tricky question, and I think a lot of instructors struggle with that. How to teach most effectively. And before I even answer that question, I think the downfall of jiu-jitsu, one of the weaknesses of jiu-jitsu, is the teaching part. Because jiu-jitsu is so fun, and I think as it was developed over time, whether Japan or Brazil, the whole evolution over decades, and the entire time, I don't think there was much thought put into how to teach. It was more of a fighting style, and we talk about this on my podcast quite frequently with different guests, but it's just because you are a black belt does not make you a phenomenal teacher. Now, you might know jiu-jitsu, and there's no question about this, but teaching to others is a very different skill. And I think a lot of that success from a student perspective, to your question, leans onto the teacher. And it is the teacher's responsibility to show those routes, to show those forks, to make some of those decisions, or at least encourage student to make some of those decisions. Now, as an instructor, I cannot do all the work for the student.
Right,
and actually
you can only teach so much.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And especially today, when everything is available on our devices and the data is so accessible to everybody, I think the function of the instructor has changed over the last few decades too. Before, even when I was starting, the instructor or the teacher, it was more of he is the one who knows everything, and I need to listen to him. And whatever he says, it must be right because he is the one. And because that's how the world worked at that time. Not today. It's different. I think the function of the instructor is more of a guide, not necessarily the one who knows it all. Because, we simply have the data accessible. I can pull up or any, and I'm not saying technique. Any technique, any is all, and honestly, it's all free too, because most of it, I said, that's a different topic, but like separation between free YouTube and paid instructionals is the explanation, in my opinion. It's like the packaging, but you can get anything on your phone, remotely, on your anywhere you are. So as an instructor, our function has changed. It's no longer showing the secrets, because there's no secrets. Mm-hmm. It's allowing the student to understand how these concepts, how these motions, how these little systems can be understood in a very easy way. Now, that's the hard part now, because we're talking about comprehension. We talk about education. We're not talking about jiu-jitsu itself. We talk about education. How do you present these complex motions to a student who's never done it before?
Right.
Now, that is hard, right? So, and I think there's this very fine line, besides being very in-depth conceptual instructor who shows you very high level concept and mechanically how it works, versus being, showing step-by-step instruction to the student who's never done it before. So I think in some way, at least the way I teach, there's a combination of both, and there's a lot of gray area in it. But somebody who's on the mat for first week, month, even first 3-4 months, showing them step by step is not a bad thing. Actually, it kind of holds their hand and allows them to kind of get familiar with some of those complex motions, and some of them they've never done before, And so as their body's getting used to all these mechanics that are taking place, now deeper we go into that jiu-jitsu journey, this is, I think, where steps become a little bit more useless. Is that even a correct statement? You know what I mean?
Someone's going to hit us up on Instagram, like, step by step isn't useless. I'm a black belt.
Oh, I'm sure. Believe me. But some of the messages I get from my podcast is like, but anyway, but listen, to his own, right? This is just my opinion, and I stay by it. But as step by step is important to beginner, I think more intermediate you get and deeper you get into that journey, this is, I think, where the creativity comes in. This is where the art part really truly starts getting born and getting inspired, because the moment you achieve that blue purple belt, your own style, your own flavor, you see things, you want to explore it on your own. And like, how many times have you find yourself in a position where instructor shows you, I don't know, here's A, B, C, D, this is what we are working on, control the space, create the angles, watch your hips, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, whoa, I see 1, 2, 3. And he didn't even talk about any of this.
Yep. Yeah.
See, this is the creativity part. So who am I to stop you from that exploration? I think it's great that our brains are so creative and we can explore some of these things that we've never seen before. So there's a very fine line, I think, between that high level concept and then step by step. And I think good instructor really has a deeper understanding of how to teach students in which way, depending on who the student is, based on their experience, based on how their brain works. And knowing students is important, that this is how you can really maximize their success, which, if I think of like 20 years ago when I was starting, it was like you show up to the academy, you warm up, and then there's like one move and you repeat it 700 times and then you go home. And life was very different back then. And again, this is not in a judgmental way of teaching back then, but just we didn't know any better. Today we are smarter. Things have evolved, and there's intelligence behind fitness, and there's intelligence behind jiu-jitsu and mechanics, how it works. And I think at the same time that makes it easier for the new students, right? Because jiu-jitsu is complicated on its own. Why would we make it even more complicated?
Right. So for me, I kind of have this, and this is just my humble opinion as someone who's been doing jiu-jitsu for a couple of years now. I feel as, new practitioners, they should feed the hunger of knowledge when they can, right? Like even if you're like 2-3 weeks in your class and you're starting to get, or I wouldn't say that soon, maybe a month or two in class, and you're starting to get, you're starting to build your base of knowledge. I don't think anyone should start researching, in my opinion. I don't think anyone should start researching until they've built a firm ground, a firm understanding of some of these very basic ideas and concepts that we go over in class. Because if you build a house on top of a weak foundation, your house is just going to fall. You know what I mean? You have to have these foundational moves in order to start building on top of them. So do you feel that online content and all this free stuff like YouTube, BJJ Fanatics, do you feel that these are going to have more of a detrimental aspect to them in the long run, or do you feel that they are going to be more beneficial in the long run?
I think it's like with almost anything in life. Anything in moderation is good. Mm-hmm. If you overdo it, it's going to hurt you in the long run and actually could collapse you completely. So think about it. Like, running is beautiful, but if you run too much, you're going to just destroy your knees and hips. Right. It is what it is. I mean, that's number one, injury for most runners, right? So like even, going out and having fun, that's fun. That's great. But if you do it every single day, it's not going to work. It's right. Like, so anything with moderation is a good thing. I think we are in a world of digital media. That's what we are. That's what we live in today. So ignoring the fact that you have accessibility to all of these instructors would be very foolish, in my opinion. Right. And I do tell my students, go and do research. I mean, go research this. But I think there's a very fine line behind doing research and seeking education versus stimulating your eyes with garbage. Like, right. You know what I mean? Like there's big difference between me going on YouTube and me looking how to pass guard in this specific situation and really studying it versus scrolling through Instagram and watching 75 videos in 1 minute. You know what I mean? Like that's a big difference. Yeah. Right. So which one are we doing? Right. Like,
well, let me interject in there real quick, because I think you bring up a great point, is weeding through all the BS. Even on YouTube, there are still instructors out there that put up things that they know isn't the highest quality movement, but they know that it looks good and someone's gonna watch it. Like even today. So how do we decipher through that? And that's where I kind of go back to, maybe you should have a better understanding of these basics so you can be like, I don't really know if that's going to work, or ask your instructor, like, how do we decipher through that?
Yeah, and listen, that's the hard part, right? Like,
once again,
I mean, but I think, well, first of all, if you are a new student and you are just beginning this journey, I think conversations with your instructors or higher belted academies, are important. This is where a good instructor will say, listen, stop YouTubing this nonsense because you're looking at freaking Baron Bolos and you don't know how to do a transition to the mount, right? But if you are seeking this information, perhaps look at this guy because he does quality product, and, like at some point we also have to look at this as you do get what you pay for. And that's important part too. And I get it. I'm gonna sound cheap now, and everybody's gonna say, okay, he's gonna plug his own stuff and all. But listen, but there's some truth behind this. Like most of the instructors put some content out there just to create the exposure. Okay, but at the same time, that content is what it is. Like if I prepare a paid instructional to be purchased, my approach to that instructional is going to be very different versus when I'm doing a clip for Instagram. Like, think about it from a product perspective, right? It's like something that's going to be sold is going to be probably higher quality than something that is given away for free. So, as a student, I think you have to look at it from a similar perspective. Now, there's plenty of free content that's good quality. I'm not questioning that part. But I'm saying is if you're seeking answers, if you want to educate yourself, if you really want to dig into the grind, if you want to get to the meat and potatoes, right? Perhaps spending $30 on an instructional of high quality instructional is going to bring you bigger results or bigger return versus spending endless hours trying to find something on YouTube and you don't even know if it's good. So, like, we have to make intelligent decisions for ourselves, and I think that's one of them. It's where do you invest your time? Like I call this now it slipped my mind. Vortex of YouTube. That's what I call it. It's like that the bar on the side. You just keep
the
going. Suggestion bars. This is the most dangerous thing ever. And listen, I'm guilty of this charge. Like, half guard passing, boom, and you're going, and then it's like, what is this? Oh, what? Oh, and then like 3 minutes later, you're looking at like I don't know, Elon Musk shooting rockets to moon, and like, how did you end up in there? You know what I mean? It's like you. Staying focused and staying narrow is hard today. The points of distractions are so crazy, and it's like so from a jiu-jitsu perspective, I always tell my students, at least, it's like, listen, you whatever you invest in, you're going to get back.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are investing in free products like YouTube, great, stay focused. I think it's harder to find things on YouTube because of the oversaturation of videos and the weeds that you have to get through. It doesn't mean you can't find it. There's quality product out there. However, you have to be organized. You have to do all the work. Or you can pay for instruction or wherever you get them from, and then things are organized for you, which means you don't have to be distracted. Everything is kind of in one bucket. Everything is available to you. And then it's up to you to get the content and convert it into your head and then make use out of it, because another question behind this whole conversation is if you watch content, but you do nothing with it.
Yeah.
Are you wasting your time?
Are you wasting space that could be used for something more?
I'm just the guy asking questions. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I agree. That's where I kind of go with it too, is like, the reason I kind of don't really want too many new practitioners doing that is because I feel like it's going to take up valuable space if they're looking up, like you mentioned, if they're looking up Baron Bolos, but they can't even like Toriando pass or pass an open guard, then they're just spinning their wheels,
Yeah.
And it's really hard. And things like Jiu-Jitsu X and BJJ Fanatics, the reason that you have to pay for these is because they just don't allow anyone to come make it. I'm not going to get an email from Keenan Cornelius saying, "Hey, we want you to come do an instructional for us on Jiu-Jitsu X." You know what I mean? Like, they curate the people that they come on their platforms for specific reasons because they know they're going to put out quality content. Yeah, I know Gordon Ryan's instructionals are $150, $200, sometimes more, but that's because he has a proven method of doing these moves and techniques. So yeah, you might be able to gain a little bit more out of his paid content than some random blue belt that's like might be a host of a podcast that's putting out a good clip that he did in training one day. You just got to keep that in mind also.
Yeah, I mean, quality is important. I mean, it's and there's another component too behind all this. I think is body types, and so like I don't know. Let me see. Example. Let's just say you are. We have a student who is 5'5", 120 female. Okay, and she's purchasing Hodger Gracie. I don't know how tall Hodger is, but 6'6", over 200 pounds.
6'6", yeah.
And listen, Hodger is one of my favorite players. I love his game. I love what he does. I could study him all day long. However, Hodger Gracie might not be the best body type for that female. Do you see what I'm saying? And now there's a conflict, right? So how do we have to make, again, intelligent decisions behind it versus that female finding somebody who is more or less her size, perhaps somebody who is a little bit more appealing. We have that connection, the way how our brains work, and we can make that transition of education a little bit more seamless versus you trying to, jump through hoops. Is like, well, how come he's doing that? Well, perhaps because his leg is a foot longer than yours, or perhaps he is literally 18 inches taller than you.
Yeah.
These are things that we cannot control. We cannot get longer or shorter. We cannot shrink or expand. Like, we can't. We are what we are, and we have to work with that. So I often say, when you're going to do research, when you're doing privates, when you're going to seminars, there's one is the entertainment component. You want to see that, you want to meet that person. But the other one is, are you going to really take something away from that instructor? Mm-hmm. And if so, then maximize it. But if not, then maybe just think about it if that investment is worth what you're putting into it, what you're going to get out of it. You see what I'm saying? So that's another
absolutely.
component that's often underestimated.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to the whole conversation I want to have is like this concept of education, right? When you first start, you're just trying to take in as much as possible, and you don't really think about, like, how is this going to help me? Is this going to hurt me? Is my body type right for this? Mm-hmm. Right? You're so naive to these little nuances when it even comes to gaining knowledge, and as you start, becoming more of a senior white belt, a young blue belt, senior blue belt, it all starts to change. It just changes and changes and changes. And then you start to realize, well, actually my game is more of this now, mm-hmm. And then that's what's really cool is when you start developing your own game, late blue into early purple is really, mostly purple, right? Is where you really should start, like, knowing what exactly you want to do, right? Where you want to go with these things, right? So when you start developing that, that's to me, that's when things just start getting a whole lot more fun. You know what I mean? Like, I'm at this stage now where I just love putting myself in bad positions and just experimenting. And if I get tapped, it's okay. That's if I execute this crazy thing that I want to do, that it's kind of outside of my game, but I feel like it's beneficial for me, then that's a win for me, right?
Yeah.
So to go into like the next topic, like, how has winning changed from white to black? What does that look like now compared to when you first started?
Welcome, everyone. This episode of Elbows Tight Podcast is brought to you by Amino Co. Travis, go ahead and tell us about Amino Co.
So I have been using Perform by Amino Co. It is 100% science-backed formula, patented, and it is a great pre-workout and intra-workout. Some of the science behind it is it supports athletic performance by triggering muscle protein synthesis and reducing muscle breakdown during exercise. It improves the mental focus and decreases the feelings of fatigue by providing the optimal balance of neurotransmitter precursors. And then finally, it increases nitric oxide production and promotes energy for sustained peak performance. I've been using this about 30 minutes before my Jiu-Jitsu classes, and I must say it has been helping me immensely. I feel more focused. I feel more energized. Recovery after class feels much better. I wake up in the morning after and don't feel nearly as beaten up, and it tastes great. I have the pink lemonade right here. I have the blue raspberry coming in. John, where can people at home find this?
You can go to aminoco.com/elbowstight. You can use the code elbowstight. You'll get 30% off. Again, go to aminoco.com/elbowstight. Use the code elbowstight to get 30% off, and you get a free gift with every purchase.
Ooh.
Thank you, Amino Co.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I have like these flashbacks, right? So like, I think every while, not to categorize people, but it every white belt I think goes to this stage of like, I will not tap. It's against the code. Don't ever, don't even blink. You will go out before you tap.
Yeah.
And then you get to this purple belt where you're like intentionally putting yourself in chokes. Intentionally putting your shoulders are so jacked up because you intentionally experiment how far you can take it and all crazy weaving escapes and all that. And you're becoming a wizard and all the other stuff. And I think that is one of the biggest milestones in everybody's jiu-jitsu is noticing what is important and what our goals are. So when we are in the beginning of the journey, the first year or two, survival is a huge win. Huge win. Whether we like it or not. Yeah. Whether we like it or not, survival is like the objective of the life. Like, you will not get passed and smashed. No, I don't care for my, I'll die before you do that, right? And same thing with submissions. Like, how many times do you see, somebody in the beginning of the journey, they are rolling and the choke is fully in, they go red, they go white, they go blue, and they are still not tapping. Like, what is the point behind this, right? But in all full justification is we don't know any better. Like, we just don't. Like, we don't know, how to escape. We don't know whether that's important or not. Like, we haven't been exposed to all this. So even though, it sounds crazy, especially looking in retrospect, like I look back 20 plus years ago and I was like, man, I was so stupid. Like my body would be so much more appreciative today, but it is what it is. We all go through these motions, and I think as we mature up through our jiu-jitsu, as we get better, as we have a larger comprehension of what is happening around us, this is where the evolution of jiu-jitsu starts taking place internally, and I call this a jiu-jitsu intelligence. That's what I tell my students. You're getting smarter about your jiu-jitsu. Tapping somebody out is no longer the objective. Now, objective is point of control. Because see, you know, when you have that shoulder fully controlled the way you want it, that submission is literally doesn't move away. So you're not hyper-focusing on that submission. That submission is almost irrelevant. Like, this is the feeling that a lot of students describe as, my instructor is always 5 moves ahead of me. And like I always tell everybody, like, we can't read minds. We can't be 3 steps ahead of you. We can't. We just can't. But what I can do is put you in a fully controlled position where I know you only have 2 choices. Either you're going to walk into my submission or you will lean in the opposite direction and you will begin escaping. And at that point, I will make my adjustments. Like, and that is really that intelligence that I often talk about, and with that being said, our objectives change, our goals change. Again, the submission is not as important as the point of control. Maybe, and even think about it this way: if you can control somebody to the point where they do everything that you want them to do, now how much fun that could be. You know what I mean? Now you're talking about creativity. You move this way, they do this. You move that way, they do it. And this is what like a lot of beginner students experience is like, he's just toying with me. He's just he's just doing whatever he wants. Well, in a way, yes, but often that is kind of what you talked about a moment ago. It's that shifting of those goals, and how winning has a different definition now. It's like some of the students that we do one-on-ones or private lessons or kind of hyper focus on specific things to help them, achieve their goals. Like, they often have homework, and over a week or 2, they have to go back and like even I did a private this morning with 2 gentlemen, and one of them had an objective of, you will put yourself intentionally in an open guard position. I don't want your feet to be closed at all. I want the feet to be open. And you will allow them to start passing the guard. And then you will react accordingly. You need to make sure that they don't pass all the way full, but you need to be vulnerable, because you locking your legs behind their back and squeezing those knees together does nothing to your guard retention. You need to put yourself in a vulnerable position. And this is what smart drilling is. Now, I'm not talking to do that in a full sparring session because obviously the result is going to be very different. But when we are practicing, when we are drilling, when we are going through these points of exploration, we need to put ourselves in a vulnerable position. And that's what I would call a win. If you are able to retain that guard, that's your win because that was your goal. It's not the sweep. It's not a submission. Your goal is to retain the guard. And if you succeed, gold star for you. Good for you. Let's talk about what went well. Let's talk about what didn't go well. Let's make adjustments from there.
Oh, you there? Okay.
Sorry, did I lose you?
Yeah, for a second there. So the last
Okay.
thing you said was, let's talk about what went well and what didn't go well, right?
Yeah. So, and based on that, you can start reestablishing the goals and you can begin seeking a new path. This is where these forks are coming into play. This is what you talked about a little bit earlier, making intelligent decisions, how to grow your game as you continue evolving. So do you find that in your jiu-jitsu often where this winning, quote unquote, has been redefined over X amount of years that you've been on the mat?
Absolutely. When I first started, I thought winning was tapping people, even as a white belt, right? Winning was I tapped someone, they didn't tap me, right? That was a win for me. But even as a white belt, I start to realize that that's not winning. Like I could have just overpowered them. They could have just gave it to me or whatever. And then I really started to take into consideration survival, like you mentioned also. As a white belt, your whole white belt should be learning how to survive. Right. You should learn how to be able to defend from every position, how to give everyone the hardest time possible of submitting you. And to me, even that kind of changes too, because my survival technique was being as still as possible, sucking up every bit of space so someone can't get my arms away from me. And I'm a strong guy, so it was already hard enough for them to get my arms away from me, to move my hands to get out of a choke or something like that. And then it changed to, well, I should probably start being more active in my survival. I should probably try to advance my position in this survival, right? Instead of just having someone in mount and then just being as tight as possible and them not being able to do anything. Yeah, that's you survived, right? But did you really do anything?
Well, and that's like a separate topic here, but
Right.
it's very interesting to look at a definition of survival and defending.
Yeah.
It's like that's often had conversation with many instructors out there, especially in this blue belt, maybe early, in the white belt and the early blue belt stages, where we often think that survival is actually a good thing. Like, it's okay, and I always try to challenge my students, at least, to think about it as, what are you gaining from survival? Like what is your takeaway after you have survived, after that process is done, and somebody a while back told me, surviving is just like coexisting. You're not doing anything. You just trying to stay alive, essentially. And if that's your objective, life is good. No judgment whatsoever. However, defending is very different because now you are stopping.
Yeah.
You're stopping your partner from progressing, right? So you're not coexisting. You making action to actually impact your partner, right? And now if you take this one step further, escaping is now one step further. Now you making action to remove yourself out of that situation, right? So like you have these three slightly different stages or different action points, but they are very different, and sometimes I think we mix them. There's some gray area, and often we think that when we are surviving, we are actually escaping, and we often not. And I think a lot of points of conflict comes in, and then we're getting smashed and destroyed, and we go home and we cry and
Cry about it later.
Pillow, yeah, absolutely. I do it every night.
I think that you know what? I'm not even gonna lie to you. I didn't even think about that as maybe that was a slight progression in my idea of survival. Right? Survival, like you mentioned, is coexisting in a role and not being submitted, and then you go into now I want to start. What was the second one that you said? It was defending, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So now you're defending. So now someone goes for this move, and you're able to stop them, and then
Mhm.
maybe even get to a better position, and then escaping, you can completely disengage from a bad position. That's a great point, and honestly, that just changed my idea of what what I thought survival was, because there definitely is a tier progression on how
Mhm.
you could go from there. And then you start escaping, and then into your late white belt, early blue belt, then you could start reversing. You could
Oh
start,
yeah.
doing these different things to gain a position, or to gain a ticket in your booth. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, all right,
Absolutely.
now I'm gonna start building momentum, because
Mhm.
I was able to get you off of me, or something like that too.
Yeah.
It's a
No, and I
great
think
way
that
to look at it.
yeah, and it like I would encourage everybody to really think about these stages of positioning as they are actually rolling, as they are experiencing it. Because like think about it, just envision this. You were in bottom of side control. Your arms are out open and they are just smashing you right on top. Are you doing anything in order for you to defend?
No.
No, but yet, think about this. But yet, often the question comes out, how do I escape from this position? Right? Like that's a very general question. Like, how do I escape from this position? And in my mind is like, you can't escape. Right now, you cannot escape because you're not defending.
Yeah, I
You're
was about
not
to say.
making any frames. You're not
Yeah, man,
protecting
this is a
yourself at
great. Look
all.
at this.
You know? But like the moment you start defending, you create your frames, you turn to the side, you create angles, your hips are free, you create a little bit of space, you're controlling the distance and so on, right? Now you're defending. Okay, you're defending. That means you're not surviving. That means there is no struggle, you're not coexisting, you're actually making intelligent decisions. Now, once you start defending, now we can start escaping. So now you're removing yourself out of this bad situation and you're progressing out towards something that's more beneficial to you, right? So as you are escaping, you're no longer defending anymore. This is not you defending. You're not stopping him from doing. You're actually making action doing something else. So, but see, when you put yourself in one of those three brackets, you clearly know what to do. Because when you are escaping, you are not surviving. You're not. When you're defending, you are not escaping. When you're surviving, you're definitely not escaping, nor you do you see what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
you're in one of those three. Now you have to make a decision which one are you in, and then life is easier. It's like we find ourselves in the bottom of side control and your arms are out, your legs are out, you're getting smashed, your face is turning red because you got the shoulder of love smashing right into you. 100 kilos are fully in play. It's like, I can't escape.
Yeah.
Jiu-Jitsu is beautiful.
Yeah, it's great, because hopefully someone at home listens to this, because it's honestly like, now I'm like, man, I really have to kind of go through the stages of survivability. I'll start calling that the stages of survivability, right? In order to progress into this. I think it's great. And then it could go into, you can even add that into your idea of winning, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
kind of like to the beginning of this conversation or this topic, kind of back into your idea of winning. If your idea of winning right now is surviving, then that's
Mhm.
great. If your idea of winning is defending, even better. And then ultimately your idea of winning should be escaping.
Absolutely.
Like, this could all go back to that idea
Mhm.
at the beginning of this topic, because it can give you a goalpost to move towards, right?
Oh,
You're like,
100%.
your goalpost shouldn't always be survivability in that
No.
idea. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You should be able to move that goalpost a little bit further and further down the field in order to progress, because progression is going to look different too in each stage of your journey as well. Because progression at the beginning is learning how to shrimp, right?
Mhm.
You're like, man, I can't figure out, or how to Granby roll down the man, let me tell you, I'm not quick side story. Learning to Granby roll for Travis at the beginning was me basically rolling on my side down the mat, thinking that I was inverted. You know what I mean? Like, the first time I did it down the mat, I was like, man, this is great. Then the other night, we're Granby rolling as part of the warm up, and I've been doing it the same way for 2-3 years now. No, longer than that. And then my instructor looks at me. He says, Travis, you're doing it wrong. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is how I've always done my Granby rolls. He's like, no, you put your arms behind your back, not under your legs. I was like, what? And I did it, and I was like, Oh my God, I've been doing it wrong, man. Like, it's so funny how that happens, you know?
Yeah, no, I think the irony of this whole situation is that we probably do. Think about this. We probably do something wrong every single day, and then we have no idea about it.
No idea.
No clue. You're just going through it, and it's like that's how I've done it. That's how I've done it for 20 years. Like that's how it has to be good.
So kind of like to tracking progression, how would you recommend people track their progression? Because there's a couple different things that come to my mind, like journaling, reflection. I got my bachelor's degree in organizational leadership, and one thing that they talk about a lot is reflection. Looking how far you've came or what worked and didn't work, kind of like to your point beforehand. And then one thing I like too is like videoing myself to see what my technique looks like, and then also videoing my instructor if he allows me to. Like, hey, can I video this real quick for studying later? Mm-hmm. So where do you think a practitioner will gain the most value in documenting their progression?
Yeah, so first of all, as you are talking, sorry about my reach if you're watching this on video, but I wanted to get
I was like, you can't hug me. You can't hug me, Thomas.
I was trying, but no. Listen, I want to show you this. So this is my training
Is that
journal.
wood?
No, it's just leather.
Oh, I thought it was wood. It looks good.
Yeah. No, but this is my journal, and you can't read stuff in here, but because there's a lot of stuff, but I write every day. I journal a lot. This is my podcast journal. Boom. So everything that's happening on a podcast, and I have 2 more of these at home. So, and they all have different purpose. Okay. And the reason why I'm showing you this, because people hate journaling. They hate taking notes. People don't want to write things down. And let me just make everybody upset out there. Okay. Because that's what I do best. Making notes on your phone is not journaling. That's not journaling. Okay. There is something that have been proven over the years, and there are studies out there. You can find them, Google them. But there is something about you taking a pen and writing with your own hand on a piece of paper. Okay, your brain, the function of writing things down with a pen engages a different part of the brain that you would take a note on the phone or record it or do other things, right? So, and that seals the information by far deeper and by far longer than any other function or any other way that you would take notes. Okay, so one, I'm a huge note taker. I love it. I encourage my students to do it. Matter of fact, if you do privates with me, you don't have a notepad, like I will send you out to the front desk to get a paper because you need to take notes during private lessons. Like you have to, And so I try to show that to my students as a very powerful way of their information retention. Let's just call it that, okay? But that's not all of it. You can do other things that they are as beneficial, right? And in video you mentioned, it's phenomenal tool that didn't exist for me when I was studying, and I use it all the time when we are doing, especially like I mentioned, students having homework, when they work on specific things for themselves, I tell them record it and bring it back. I want to see what you are working on. And here's the kicker. If you've never recorded yourself, do it. I'm going to challenge you. Do it, because what you think you are doing, very likely you are not doing it. I can tell you endless amount of. Matter of fact, there was a tournament recently here locally, and we were at the tournament, and one of the students, did very well, and we are kind of reflecting after the whole thing, and he goes like, "Man, I was struggling with this, and I was doing blah blah blah," and I was like, "You sure? Like, which match are you talking about?" He's like, this. I was like, "No, you were not in that position." And he was like, "No, I was. I was. I was." I was like, "Dude, I was watching you. You were not in that position." I was like, right. Let's pull the tape. So he gets his phone. He rewinds it to that point where he's talking about. He's like, "Huh. Okay. I thought.
I guess I wasn't.
Blah blah blah. I guess I was not." But this is the intriguing part about our brains, It's like what we think sometimes appears around us or what we think we are doing under high stress level situation, we are not necessarily doing it. We might be visioning it as we want to do it. Our brain registers differently. Anyway, where I'm going with all of this is that record yourself. You would find it so amazingly eye-opening what you really do versus what is happening. It is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. So, like, when we do tournaments or students do tournaments, I always tell them, record it. Otherwise, I cannot give you feedback. Like,
yeah,
I want tangible, unquestionable data visually that we can analyze. Same thing with sparring sessions when they have homework or when we work on specific things. I ask them to perform specific drills. I was like, record yourself, because now we can pause it. We can highlight it. See, watch this balance points. You leaning forward, your posture is broken. That means you're off balance. One motion here, you're going to fall. All this can be very easily highlighted and analyzed, to benefit the student. Now, the trick here behind all of this, and that's the hardest part for every student, is putting yourself in a point of vulnerability when you are being recorded and then later essentially criticized, because that's what point of education really is. It's finding the areas where you want to improve and be vulnerable enough to say, yep, this is not the best point for me, and I really need to make changes in order for me to continue growing. So identify some of those points of improvement is very important. And one of the ways is really to record yourself. So, and then, setting goals, I think jiu-jitsu is so difficult to measure. It's so hard, especially in the beginning, when we really have our goals and objectives are, like destroying people and submitting everybody and all that. Setting a realistic and really tangible goals is really, really important for every student, and this is, I think, where instructors come in really with a lot of power. Go talk to your instructors and say, listen, what should I be working on? Okay. Or better. Don't rewind that. Remove that from the episode. Gone. Disappear. No, don't ask an instructor, what should I be working on? Go to the instructor and say, listen, I want to improve my guard. What do you recommend that I do to improve my guard retention? Boom. And now we have something smart. Now we have something tangible. Now a good instructor will tell you, okay, well, let's take a look at the situation. Boom. This is, okay, I want you to keep distance. I want you to control this distance. I want you to have your frames in. I want you to move your hips. Perhaps, you're leaning flat on your back. Let's make these adjustments. Now we are talking about some tangible changes that we can apply every single time we find ourselves in a spot. So now we can go back, and now we can make some of these improvements. So, but none of this really starts. If you are unable to put yourself in the vulnerable spots of being viewed and criticized, or criticize is not a good word to describe this, but to critique or given feedback, but being vulnerable to hearing that is a good point. And then, make notes. Like, what, okay, I rolled 6 times today. Who did I roll with? I rolled with John. I rolled with Bobby. I rolled with, blah, 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 blah. How did it go? Okay, here I passed the guard so many times, blah, blah, blah. Here, okay, Bobby caught me by surprise in that triangle choke. Okay, let's believe that. And here's the beautiful part behind note-taking or setting like these points of reflection every day, that if you look at them over a month or 2 or 6, a longer period of time, you're going to start noticing, damn, Bobby's catching me in triangles every single time. Now, why? Why? Why is Bobby catching me in triangles? Well, maybe Bobby's 6'6", and that's his just very, that's very appealing to him. It's very easy for him. Okay. But that doesn't change that I need to change something in order for Bobby not to catch me. So perhaps I need to look at my posture. Perhaps I need to look at a space control. Perhaps I need to give up pressure passing where my head goes in first. Maybe I need to stand up and separate myself. But see, all of this creates a pattern, and now I can react to that pattern. And if I do react to the pattern accordingly to what I need to do, my success will go up, versus not even acknowledging the fact that Bobby catches me in triangle every week, and I don't even know why. So I think we have a lot of tools today where we can learn, rephrase, that we can educate ourselves about jiu-jitsu. It's not only a learning, but it's actually a true education, finding points of improvement, finding how to make the changes and continue growing versus showing up and brainlessly rolling for an hour, hoping or forcing submissions and being that guy, that girl. And, I don't know. I perhaps a unique point of view here, but I do think that the moment we stop progressing in jiu-jitsu, this is when we quit. It's not, but it's not that we don't like it. Like I was actually having this conversation with somebody recently, and they asked me, have you ever run into somebody who didn't like jiu-jitsu? And I don't know if I ever have. Everybody, even the people who stop training, they love jiu-jitsu. Just it's not their priority. And a lot of them, they stop training because they don't feel they are getting better. Their priorities are changing. And that's again, separate topic here, but often we don't get better because our priorities change and we don't train often enough, or, consistency is not there. And it's like the vicious circle. I don't want to train more because I'm not good enough, but I'm not good enough because I don't train more. And it's like, what came first, the egg or the chicken,
I was just thinking that same thing.
No, I'm going to get
so when did you start picking up the idea of, putting so much importance on tracking your journey? Did you do it as from a day one white belt? And if not, do you think that you would have progressed faster if you would have?
Yeah, no, definitely. That came along probably towards brown, if not black belt. Late in my journey. And actually all that sourced from my corporate job, where I was involved in multiple meetings every single day, and just tracking things was impossible. Talking to dozens of people every single day and knowing what they say, when they said it, what needs to get done. It was very challenging. And I start taking notes quite a bit, tasking everything and really checking things off, as days or weeks were passing by. And at some point, I have converted this to jiu-jitsu because it just started becoming very chaotic, And it really, to be honest with you, all started with a very simple kind of journal concept of today was a good day on the mat, or today sucked. I got smashed. I mean,
most of my days,
but that's how it started. It just started with very simple date and, one kind of descriptor of how the day was, how the training was. And then it kind of evolved into 3 good things and 3 bad things, and I start really seeking deeper and saying, okay, today was good because blah, 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 and this was good too. This was good too. And then, okay, well, it was good, but I still found 3 things that I could do better. I had 3 things that I didn't like, 3 things that I could improve on, 3 things that I needed to highlight from a negative perspective, just so you have a kind of anchor point on is not everything is, unicorns and rainbows. Jiu-jitsu is difficult. It's complex, so highlighting these things. And then, as time went on, it kind of pivoted off of that. And there were goals, like, how do I change these 3 things? Okay, so next time I need to do blah, blah, blah. And now it's pretty natural at this point. Like, I end of every day, I sit down before I go home and, I kind of reflect on the day and write things down. And sometimes I put quotes in there, and sometimes I put things that somebody said something or a comment the student made or impact that was made on me, so like in all that allows me to create more trackability of jiu-jitsu and the students who have taken that on, I see a lot of success from that perspective. Would that change? Would that improve my jiu-jitsu if I started that earlier? I'm pretty sure it would. But honestly, I wasn't that smart. I wasn't that smart. No, when I was starting jiu-jitsu, I was like box of bricks. No.
Hey, we were all there, man. You don't start getting that flow until until you really start understanding when your own body, and then how these moves actually are supposed to work. And I mean, I've been, like I mentioned, I've been doing it for coming up on 5 years now, and I'm still every day I'm in class that I training thinking, what am I doing, man? Like this feels wrong, and being able to ask my instructor on like, hey, I need your help. Could you come here just for a split second? Tell me why I'm stupid.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
So it's just crazy. The more you do it, the more reps you get in, the easier it is to understand, right? And the more times you fail, the more you can learn, right? Like failure's
Yeah.
failure's not the absence of success. You know what I mean? Failure is part of success in my eyes.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? You gotta be, to your point, you gotta be able to be vulnerable and put yourself in these positions and tell yourself, I don't know anything. Like even there's so much knowledge that everyone has that I don't have, that you don't have, that Helio Gracie didn't have, that we have to be humble to the point to where we can be like, I don't know it as much as I think I do,
Yeah.
and that only comes through time.
Yeah, and I agree. And even I do believe that even when you do get to the black belt level, there's still points that answers I don't know.
Yeah.
And like again, going back to the beginning of the conversation, I don't know if there is one person in jiu-jitsu world who knows everything. I think what's interesting is that a good instructor actually has the ability to admit and say, I don't know. However, I can help you figure it out
Yeah.
because
I'll get back with
I
you.
have understandings of some of these things, and let's sit down, let's brainstorm, let's figure this out. Let's unfold, let's untie this knot. Let's see what's underneath here. But I don't have that answer. I've never been in that position, and that's possible. I mean, why wouldn't it be? So points of vulnerability, it's what is that, what is that phrase? Step one of solving a problem is admitting there is one. I
Yeah.
mean, how many times are we, it's like, no, I know everything. I'm the man.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Well,
mean,
then why didn't that work?
right, exactly.
Hey, Thomas. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today, man. If you want to go ahead and plug yourself again, where can people find you at and follow your show and everything like that?
Yeah, so we Instagram is the best way to get in touch with you. So everybody, if anybody wants to drop me a line, feel free to do it. My last name, just look it up. Only one Polish guy with Rozdz. So it's not that hard to find. But if you want to tune into our podcast, we have at this point over 100 episodes with great names and great stories. Digging into kind of historical part of jiu-jitsu and getting into the true story behind it, every individual. The Raw Radio is out there, every podcast platform. Check it out. And then I also do, and that's really not as popular as the Raw Radio, but I also do Ask a Black Belt podcast, which is one question, questions sent to me from everywhere, all around, and I just record the answers, put them out there. It's on YouTube, it's on all podcast platforms. Feel free to dig into it. If that helps somebody out there, then I'm happy to contribute.
Well, thank you, Thomas, once again for coming on the show. This was a great conversation. I feel like we definitely showed the progression of when you first start to when you first start again at black belts. Thank you for all your answers today, man. I can't wait for people to listen to this at home. So thank you, everyone, for listening and watching it at home. And remember, no oil checks here. John's not here, so I got to say it. Os. Thanks, guys. Later.